who have connections with me. I wasn't ready to talk the third one, but eventually I did. But there was a garden, a meadow, and it was really beautiful. This is a picture that I found on the internet, but it was the grass was maybe like a foot tall, and we were kicking a ball in a field, and it was so soft, like the grass was made out of feathers. It was so soft. And we were enjoying each other, having fun like children playing in the field. And off in the distance was a line of trees, and I remember there being water. When the trees stopped, there was a lake sort of on the other side, and over here was a wall. And the woman that I talked to said she remembers watching us while we were playing in the field. And she was sitting up on that wall watching us. And I said, I remember that. She was sad she wouldn't play with us. I'm kind of getting past myself. I'm telling you something in the future that hadn't happened quite yet, but it's such a long story. I've already talked for an hour. Am I okay?
Yes, fine.
All right. So she's remembering these things, and she told me some more details and things, and we stayed up like, I said I had to meet these people. They remember me and I remember them. I want to meet them in person. So Roy and I both drove separately because we all live in different states. And I never drive by myself, away from home, but I drove to her house. And he drove to her house, and we met there, and I spent a couple nights there. Roy only spent one night because his wife she came to when she was sick, so she had to go home. But that first night we were there, we stayed up in the middle of the night just talking and sharing our experiences. And it just blew my mind, all the things that we had in common of memories. And it just like, how can this be? It's real. I have evidence, We already were alive. And that's the same thing that Socrates was saying, that we lived somewhere else before we were born. And then our soul, at the time that he was sentenced to death, he was trying to prove that we would also go back there after we died. We would go back to that same state, that same existence. Our soul would leave our body and we would go back. And I said, that's true. Everything he was saying was true. And so as I would think about these memories or connected memories, it seemed like more and more would come. And that night, after she was sharing with me some memories, I was slept at her home. And as I was asleep, I dreamt a story that she was telling me the night before. And I had more detail than what she shared. So I couldn't wait the next morning for her to wake up so I could share it with her. And when I did, it was another connection. And I knew more details that she had not shared with me, and she confirmed it. So I have confirmation now from her and Roy. And then eventually I did contact the other woman and more confirmation. This is something that I was given as my mission. And Roy wrote about it in his book, that he asked God when he came to earth. He remembers this room when he was preparing to come to earth. And he asked God if he can be born with his memory of heaven, so he could bring the knowledge of our pre-existence. He wanted to bring it to earth. And it's been a long time since that's been given, since it's been shared. And it's a difficult thing to share because when it's been shared in the past, people were killed for it. There were, Socrates and Jesus, many, many, many people have tried to share this, and they get killed for sharing. So it kind of scares me too to be up here, but it's the truth. And I gotta do it. I gotta share too. Do my part. One of the things that we remember was this building, inside this building, where both of the women, me and Roy, all four of us remember this building. And It was like the Parthenon in Greece. You know, it had 8 columns in the front, and it was huge. And inside there was, I think, one of the women, I don't remember how many rooms, but my other woman who has Prebirth memory said there were 4 rooms, and one was huge. The other ones were smaller. Basically said in that room is when we were going over our plans of what we were going to, you know, our missions and gifts that we were given for Earth. But I remember walking down the steps, and there was a water that cascaded down the middle of the two middle columns, and the water cascaded down and went out onto the courtyard. And I remember walking down, and I remember turning around and looking how beautiful the building looked. It looked like a pearlescent marble. It was beautiful. It shone with like pearl. And then as I looked at the top, there was gold. I think they were real grapes, but they were golden grapes with gold leaves. And it was like an embossment, but it was 3-dimensional, you know, and it was growing across the top. And to see that gold gleaming on that pearlescent building, it was just beautiful. And I said, yeah, I knew that when I left this place, that we go through this veil. It's like amnesia. We forget where we came from. I said, I don't want to forget this place. I want to remember where I come from. I stared, and I'm staring at that upper corner. It's like the Parthenon. And I'm staring at this upper corner. And one of the women who also has Prebirth memories, she came down right beside the water that cascaded down. And she's looked at me, and she looked to the right. And she's seeing what I was looking at. And she did, it's beautiful, isn't it? I said, yes, it is beautiful, but that's not why I'm staring at it. I'm trying to burn it into my memory. I want to remember. And she just nodded her head, and I could see her face in that realm. I know it's her. And so I asked her, I said, do you remember that place? She said, it sounds familiar, and it sounds right, but she couldn't quite remember that. But she does remember other things. And one of the other woman that I talked to on the phone, the second one, she was leaving that realm on the courtyard, and she was escorted, one on each side of her. And she was like, it was right at the courtyard in front of this building, and just like the Parthenon in Greece, it's a straight wall. I don't know how steep, how deep that is. It seems like 20, 30 feet or so. That's where we left heaven to come to earth, just like that. And when I see this picture, I can't help but it reminds me exactly of that. And I wonder if people in the past had that same memories, and they built these things to help us remember, you know, because a lot of things that are done on earth, they're inspired and they receive visions, and people do things, you know, trying to what they see, what they envision. But over to the left side is where this field was, on the left side of the Parthenon. And there was a wall that held right to the left side of this building, and it held up the dirt that went to the field. And then along the trees on this side is another wall, and that's where the one woman, I'll call her Tam, T-A-M, but that's not her name, but just to give you a name. But she was sitting on that wall. And then Roy and I, we remember looking down on this side of the building, and there was, just like this is down real low, another level, and it was on tops of trees. And we thought, we both of each of us thought, you know, is that the Garden of Eden? Because it looked deserted. And I wondered if it was, I don't know. But Kay, I'll call the second woman, when she was escorted down, she turned back at me and she says, don't forget our names. And I said, our names? I said, oh, okay. And I'm looking, in that time, there were 5 females. And I looked at each one of us and myself, and I said all of our names. And then Roy was here, and 2 other males. And they had 4-syllable words, but I cannot remember it. but Roy had a name that was very unusual. And I thought, I don't know, because I know we're going to forget this place when we leave and go to heaven, when we leave heaven and go to earth. So I think I'll probably have difficulty time remembering Roy's name. I said, but you were given remembrance, so you should remember your name. And he does. He remembers his name, and he's told me a couple times. And for some reason, it won't stick with me. It's weird. But it started with an N, but I do not remember. But so these things, though, it just was shocking for me to realize that we did live somewhere else before we were born here, because in my mind, my life began when I was born as a baby. And I thought, when I die, our soul leaves and we go to heaven. And that was my understanding. But now that I realize if I was there with these pre-birth memories, I had my life here on earth, I had my near-death experience in the light, came back again, that's twice, from heaven to here, near-death experience here. So what's to prevent us from doing it again? So it didn't bother me. People talk about, having resurrections and having multiple life experiences. And I said, I already went back and forth, so, it just totally opened up my heart to embrace all these different type of experiences. And as I read through the scripture, I understood them with new vision. A lot of things. Jesus would talk a lot about gardens. And so I understood a lot of things about scripture. And so I would start writing about these things, and I wrote my first book. And then my first book is about my experience in 1984 in the presence of God. And then at the end of it, I started talking about my connection with Roy Mills and having pre-birth memories. And that was enough for me to put in one book, because I said that's too much to absorb all at once. And then the second book I wrote is the continuation of my pre-birth memories with the other women as well. And then when I had my experience when I read this, Plato's book about Socrates, and I merged with Socrates, and I understood what he wanted to share, and he wasn't permitted, I wrote about the information that I knew this world still needs to understand, to help us understand how this world works and how we can rise above, because there are so many things in life that we do that if we knew better, we would make better choices. And so I tried to incorporate what I connected to about positive and negative energy. And I wrote about that, and I don't have time to explain that. How much time? It's 8:15.
Yeah, if it's okay. Did you want to finish up with a few things, or else we'll start question and answer for about 15 minutes, and then we'll do raffle?
Okay. Yeah, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
I'll just say, after this book was written, it was, when I wrote this, all other things kept happening. I had more spiritual experiences. And I had to get this out first. So I wrote it in the order of what had happened and how it unfolded in my life. So this happened first, and this happened. And then in September 11th, when we had the Twin Towers, I didn't understand. I said, through these visions that I had seen, I knew that God had inspired many people throughout the world, and each of them, they became the prophets to develop their own religions. But I saw the oneness in them, and I saw, why did these people attack us? I don't understand. They're completely misguided or something. How did they get to that? To understand in the way they do and want to kill people, because that was not what I learned through the Spirit. And I prayed to God with all my heart. I said, I know it, show me how can I help? And be careful what you ask for, because God accepted my prayer. And after 9/11, this was January of 2002, for that whole week, my mind was flooded with visions and information from the very beginning, and I merged into God's consciousness. I became as a pinpoint of a perspective pinpoint of consciousness, and there was nothing created. This is before anything was created. And in the spirit, you can experience things in the past, present, or future. And I experienced what happened as God was discussing amongst himself what he wanted to do. And the upper left, and this felt masculine, and up here felt feminine. And the feminine side, she wanted to nurture something. She wanted to share herself. She wanted to share her love. She wanted to express herself. She wanted more than just being happy, but involvement with life. And the masculine side was very content just the way things were, but also understood this need to want to express itself and to share itself. And so it was discussing this back and forth. And as the masculine side was thinking and communicating to the feminine side, my little pinpoint of consciousness would merge with this masculine side, and I was that consciousness, that masculine. And then I'd come back to my pinpoint, and I'm observing it again. I'm an observer. Then when the feminine side would start responding to that side, I merged with it, and I became the feminine side. And it kept going back and forth with this conversation. Merged with the masculine, merged with the feminine, back and forth. And then I saw God